So just tell me when we are online.
Yeah, we are online right now.
We are online.
Oh, we are online. Okay. Dear participants and those who are actually listening or watching us, good morning or good afternoon. Welcome to the roundtable on the war in Ukraine. The title of the roundtable is actually determined as War in Ukraine, Consequences for Security in the Black Sea region. So we have got 4 distinguished panelists here who have expertise on various aspects of the ongoing war in Ukraine and its reflections. I'd like to first of all thank our distinguished panelists for their participation, as well as SETA for organizing such a timely and significant panel. I will give a quite general remarks on war in Ukraine to start. The war in Ukraine has been labeled as an illegal aggression and condemned by a decision of UN General Assembly as a result of the extraordinary meeting held on the 2nd March. You know, a total number of 141 states voted in favor of the decision. This decision also confirmed the Ukrainian sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity. Since the start of the war, there has been efforts to stop the aggression through various ways, including the sanctions as well as diplomacy. Now we are over 1 month since the start of the war, and unfortunately, the war is still on. This war actually has various, you know, reflections both on international security in general, as well as on the security of the Black Sea countries. The roundtable is actually organized to examine all these reflections with a particular attention on the Black Sea region. I'm going to give 10 minutes each for every of our panelists to answer actually the questions I will forward. Then at the end, we will be able to get some questions if there are any from our audiences. And in the very final part, Ambassador Dora Costa will make a brief concluding remarks, and we will conclude in this way. So I'm going to start with Ambassador Valerie Chechashvilia. He's an executive board member at the Georgian Strategic Analysis Center. He has been a career diplomat. He held various positions in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Georgia, from the 2nd Secretary to Deputy Foreign Minister. He was Minister of Finance in 2005 and the first Deputy Foreign Minister between 2005 and 2007. He served as an ambassador to Ukraine as well, so also to the Russian Federation. That actually shows us that the ambassador has quite a very first-hand knowledge about these 2 countries. Mr. Ambassador, what concerns does the war in Ukraine create for the security of the Black Sea countries? And what reflections from yesterday's NATO summit can be drawn for that respect? Please. Ambassador, could you just... Okay,
yeah.
That's okay now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. First of all, I would like to extend my gratitude to SETA for organizing this very important meeting, because we did find ourselves in a completely different world in the morning of 24th of February. And if anybody had illusions who is the main threat to international global order as well as the security in the Black Sea area. Now I think that these illusions are gone, and we all see that Russia, Mr. Putin and his administration represent the main threat. This main threat we all have to oppose. And Mr. Moderator, you have mentioned this famous resolution of UN on March 2nd. And any country cannot survive without friends and partners in this globalized world. And see what happened. 141 countries you mentioned, but who voted together with Russia? Only 4 countries. And those are Belarus, Syria, North Korea, and Eritrea. I mean, who are the friends of Russian Federation? Even closest partners of Russia, members of CSTO, Organization for Collective Security Treaty. Even those countries, they are openly, number one, declaring neutrality at least, and supporting territorial integrity of Ukraine. But the question is, how did we arrive to this situation when international order and security network in the Black Sea area are under such a big threat? And I have to say that Mr. Putin, in his manner, I mean, he very concisely and clearly articulated his main foreign policy agenda and his main goal when he addressed Duma, saying that collapse of the Soviet Union was the main geopolitical tragedy of the 20th century. So he clearly identified then, and it became clear later that he has his agenda working on these issues, that he is going to restore the Soviet Union in this or that way. And not only that, that he will fight on international arena in the spirit of Yalta, drawing new lines and spheres of influence. And then he reinforced this message with his famous 2007 Munich Security Conference February speech, which was then followed by his first aggression in 2008 against my country, against Georgia. And what happened then? I mean, it was a clear-cut invasion, but Commission of Heidi Tagliavini was created in order to sort out who was invading, who was first to begin war, and so on and so forth. We received very controversial report. And just a couple of months after 2008 August, it was business as usual with the Russian Federation. Even Russian Federation was not expelled from G8 group. So it was G7, then it became G8 when Russia was invited to G8. And then I think it was the philosophy of West, which was based on one main idea: to involve Russia in all this decision-making process in order Russia to become the full-fledged member of international community with the respective leverage. And the idea was then that Russia will extrapolate these rules of games basic for main actors in its neighborhood. But what happened was completely opposite. So those principles which Russia was applying in the neighborhood, then Russia applied in Russia's relationship with the with the main actors on the global international arena. And in 2008, we Georgian diplomats, and then I was working in Kiev. I was Secretary General of GUAM organization, Georgia, Ukraine, Azerbaijan, Moldova. We were trying to explain to our Ukrainian friends and to diplomats, to international community, that what Russia did in 2008 in Georgia, it was not exception in Russian foreign policy, that it was just extreme manifestation of common Russian policy to its neighbors. But I have to say that then Russian authorities, they were pursuing very smart policy. And I remember Minister Lavrov, when he was reporting about this war in the State Duma, he said that, Russia will always follow the international norms and principles of international law. Other neighbors doesn't have to worry about territorial integrity and borders, because Mr. Saakashvili was an exception, because Georgians made a genocide to Ossetian people, that these tales like Georgian tanks were chasing Ossetian pregnant ladies in the streets of sleeping Tskhinvali and so on. And a lot of experts and diplomats, both in Ukraine and Europe and all over the world, they breathed with relief, thinking that, okay, I mean, it happened once, but it will never repeat and so on. But then it was followed by 2014 by Crimea. And then it became clear that it is not only Russia's policy vis-a-vis its neighbors, but it's all about the broader Black Sea. Because after 2008, we are all used to this figure that Russia occupied 20% of Georgian territories, but the fact is also that Russia occupied 50% of Georgian coastline. Out of 300 kilometers, 150 kilometers of Georgian coastline was occupied as an outcome of Russian aggression in 2008. Plus, then Russia occupied Crimea, which is a new reality in the Black Sea region, because it's clear that Russia is trying to take control as much as possible over Black Sea. And look what is happening then after 2014. Now we have this war. And actually, I think that Mr. Putin has actually three plans. He had three plans in this war. Plan A was actually, as he declared from the very beginning, it was denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine, so-called. Actually, he had borrowed these principles from Potsdam Conference. These are actually 2 or 4 principles of organizing post-war Germany. Although there were also additional 2 principles, democratization and demonopolization, which actually Putin was not ready to apply, because how can he can speak about democratization of Ukraine when Ukraine has democratically elected President Zelensky, and whole world recognized it, including Russia. And in Russia, we have a gentleman who is ruling this country for last 22 years. And his political opponents are either assassinated like Mr. Nemtsov, or are in jail like Mr. Navalny, or are forced to leave the country as Mr. Khodorkovsky, Guriev, Kasparov, and a lot of others. So, and demonopolization, of course, I mean, monopolies are considered by Mr. Putin as a leverage to influence international relations, to use it as a mean of political pressure and so on. Now, this plan A was take control over whole Ukraine, but it seems now that due to heroic resistance of Ukrainian people who are fighting for their freedom, and not only for their freedom, I think, but they are fighting for the freedom and for independence, sovereignty of the whole Europe, including my country. And now he has other two plans. Plan B actually is to organize the land corridor from Russia to Crimea, and then from Crimea through Odessa district to Transnistria, thus cutting off Ukraine from the Black Sea. And imagine in this case what we will have here, what state of affairs. So actually the overwhelming majority of coastline would belong to Russia with all the respective consequences. But now I think that it is also very unrealistic, and this is actually the first project was Malorussia, second is Novorossiya, and the third plan C for Mr. Putin now is to at least keep Crimea and those territories who were under his control before the 24th of February. Now, a couple of words about, I said that his main foreign policy agenda is to define new spheres of influence, and look what happened before in anticipation of 24th. It was actually Yalta spirit and ultimatums versus diplomacy, who was supposed offered by NATO and USA, because all what USA and NATO offered were about organization of new security arrangements, taking into account also these problems which were articulated by Russia. And Russia was speaking just in very ultimatic way, saying that go back to line of 97, take away this Bucharest formula for Ukraine and Georgia. So defining just new spheres of influence. And this was actually also articulated by President Putin after his meeting with President Sarkozy before the war. He said that why you are not offering, why not publishing your proposals to us? Because we are for open and transparent diplomacy. But the point is that it was not about diplomacy. Diplomacy is when you have your position, your opponent has its position, and you are finding some compromise. Then you are signing agreement and applying this agreement in your everyday life. But when you are posing ultimatum, with ultimatum you don't have sphere for compromise. And after this, it was clear that Mr. Putin was ready for any developments, and he was ready to do whatever he did. Plus,
Ambassador, can I just interrupt?
A time.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. If you give me just 1 minute, I will finish. Okay, with some closing, because the theme is so broad, it's very difficult to.
Yeah, I know.
Okay,
I will give another chance. I think I will give another chance.
Thank you. Now, what will happen in the Black Sea to conclude it? Okay, so in order this war not to go beyond Ukrainian borders, we have to, all international community have to mobilize all efforts in order to help Ukraine to defeat Putin. If Putin will defeat Ukraine, then we'll have either plan B or plan C in action. And I think that then nobody doubts that he will go further, and we will have further bigger problems, including the Black Sea. And I think that he will attack then further. And his agenda will include not only European theater, not only former other countries of the Soviet Union, but also gaining more control over Black Sea, including straits. And this is also comes from Stalin's policy on Potsdam. Then what is another alternative? Another alternative is that altogether the whole international community backing Ukraine, altogether we will bring Russia to the situation when Russia will be compelled to come back to the well-recognized principles and norms of international law. And it will give us an opportunity to organize new set of security arrangements globally, and the part of this global picture in the Black Sea region, based, of course, on the Helsinki Basic Final Act, including a single and indivisible security sphere, which Russia is so concerned about. And this will give us an opportunity to keep interests of all involved actors, including Russia, within its internationally recognized borders. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I will stop here.
Okay, thank you very much, Ambassador Chechelashvili, for your quite valuable comments. Actually, it clearly shows that the Russian threat is basically towards the regional countries, and all the plans you mentioned are actually about expanding territorially or in terms of influence. Thank you very much again. Now, I would like to turn Major General, retired Major General Leonardo Dinu. He's a member of the Scientific Council New Strategy Center. He's a retired general in the Romanian army after nearly 38 years of career. During his career, a variety of leadership positions, especially in the military intelligence, he served. So he also served as a deputy chief of Romanian Military Intelligence Directorate for Operations. General Dinu, I would like to ask a quite specific question, quite related to the security of the Black Sea. You know, in the existing circumstances that we are now facing, what kind of regional or also and global measures are needed for the security of the Black Sea region, considering the existing situation and existing threats?
Thank you, Professor Acer, for your kindly introduction. Please allow me to say that I'm very honored to be invited to this conference. I would like to congratulate SETA, and I would like to underline the strong cooperation between SETA and the New Strategy Center. We already had a policy paper together. We've already had previous conferences, so I appreciate it very much. Starting from your question, you know very well that I was focused most of the time on the new generation warfare that Russia is conducting in the region, especially on the Black Sea littoral states, but not only, continuing with the Balkans and the entire Europe and the world. So starting from your question, the answer is very simple. Cohesion among the riparian states in the Black Sea, a unified position, reviewing all the initiatives in the regions, and not only, having a strong voice and unified voice inside NATO and European Union, and to find ways to block the Russian endeavor to create, a new world order. I will start my presentation with what I'm saying. We are at war since 2008. So since then, the geopolitical environment in the Black Sea region has changed dramatically, especially after Russia invasion of Georgia in 2008, later on annexation of Crimea, and Russian interventions in Ukraine and in Syria. So now what we are witnessing the last stage of the new generation warfare of Russia, which is the conventional war against Ukraine. In my opinion, my personal opinion, is not a war only against Ukraine. It's a war against all Europe, against the region, the entire region, all Europe, and NATO and United States especially. What Russia is doing now through military means is not only to destroy entirely Ukraine, but also to create pressure on neighboring countries through migration, and to punish in one way the European Union, NATO countries. And so I will start with the fact that we were at war. The crisis manifested a long time ago, and there was no significant resistance from major powers who, were very tolerant with their position in the new playing field. And why I'm saying that? I recall 1968, when Czechoslovakia was invaded by USSR with other Warsaw Treaty partners. And I remember that at that time, Romania was against the invasion. Very, very soon, USSR massed 2 armies at the border of Romania into Bessarabia and 2 divisions in Hungary. But there was a strong and firm opposition from Washington and London, and later on China and France, the saying, a war against Romania will be a NATO war against USSR. So they were very firm, and Romania wasn't invaded. Now, due to the political and economic interests, there was practically, I didn't see any opposition. So this is the major fact that we gained after the Ukraine invasion. We came together, and Ambassador Chechelashvili mentioned, we came together in NATO and European Union and in UN with a strong message that we are against this, the worst crisis since the Cold War. The most, a war in Europe in 21st century, which wasn't, envisaged at all. Now I'm trying to address separately the impacts on the Black Sea region. First of all, I strongly believe that Russia, after the war ends, the conventional war will end in Ukraine. Doesn't matter how it will end, but we have, and also we can figure out how this war will be ended. But Russia will continue to continue the new generation warfare, to continue the hybrid warfare, and the world will be divided. The region will be divided, will be Russia and the other European states, and there will be, I believe, like a new Cold War between Russia and NATO and United States. So a new division of Europe, is very likely. The interest in the Black Sea, we have to come united, and in my opinion, Turkey, being the major power in the region, must take the lead and will have the support of Romania. We have to watch very closely if the war, this war in Ukraine, will go for a strategic alliance with China. In my opinion, it can be, but China has different interests. And even though it will not be a strategic partnership, will be mutual support. So we may see China economic interests in the Black Sea region, and supported by Russia, and Russian interest, pursued by China in Asia. In my opinion, from political and diplomatic point of view, all initiatives in the Black Sea will be ineffective from now on. So we have to think to the new initiatives and how to reshape the old initiatives in order to bring security. Very, very probably, after Turkey took a very good position based on the law to close the straits in order not to let Russian warships to come into the Black Sea, it is probably that they will go to a proposal like to revise the Montreal Convention. It is probable. I don't know if their interest or not, but that didn't was on their. They weren't very happy with this decision. The other one depends on the outcome of this war. We have to see what will happen with the Serpent Island in the Black Sea. We have to look if the Russian military, I hope not, will be capable of taking Odessa and to have a bridge towards Transnistria. In this case, we'll have Russia, a neighbor of Romania, and a neighbor of the Danube River mouth in the Black Sea. So maybe we'll see a much more political and international law involvement in the Danube Convention. What we'll see, and we have to keep in mind, the protracted and frozen conflicts in the region. So from a military point of view, the lessons learned by Russia will further go, and they will enhance the military capabilities in the region. They will create, and we have seen that their A2AD capability in the region was not so effective. Ukrainian Air Forces was capable of doing certain missions in certain parts of Ukraine. So probably we'll see a new type of militarization of the Black Sea. And with this would be a challenge of the line of communications, will be in a Black Sea of security line of communication. We'll see the endeavor of Russia trying to control 80% of the Black Sea. Also, from here, Black Sea will be as a platform, will continue to be a platform to expeditionary forces and to promote the Russian military and political interest in the Middle East and North Africa. Another point that I would like to underline is the economic tool, the Russian geopolitical, geoeconomical tool. So as you have seen already, Russia continued to provide gas, but will weaponize more and more this resource in order to gain political goals. And he will punish those unfriendly countries. So in this way, what is happened in the EU in Brussels yesterday, in order to take measures, in order to preserve our resources, it's very important. In the region, we have to do the same. We started with Bulgaria, and we have to create, resilience in the region together. You know that already. I'm looking a little bit this with the Balkans also. So what will happen in the Black Sea will continue to manifest in the Balkans, also in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea. What I will see in the future, and we have to think about this because of the national interest of each country in NATO and European Union. I have a feeling, it's my personal feeling, that the economic sanctions will be removed step by step after the peace talks will be established between Ukraine and Russia. Why? We have seen already signs that not all the countries are happy. So they want to have their security, energy, and the main resources in order to develop economies. So Russia, for 1 year, has enough time, enough financial resources to resist, but also will try to find gaps in the regions. And we already seen the signs, addressing to Bulgarian population, creating, the information operations, trying to address, through this and to other countries that were not so hard in condemning the Ukrainian invasion. In terms of social, so there will be a major impact in the region. Most probably the most, the investments and the opportunities in Russia will have a drop. Also, the multinational companies and the specialists in these multinational Russian and Western companies in Russia already started to leave Russia, which will have impact on the region. In the information domain, cyber attacks, and we have to be very aware and have to create a regional resilience on this. Not only in the region, because the cyber has no border. Also, we have to be resilient in the Balkans, in Eastern Europe and Europe. Russia is very good in this, and we have to think very well if a cyber attack occurs in one NATO country, will be treated as an Article 5 or not. In my opinion, it doesn't matter, it takes from a distance. Affecting directly a NATO country must be taken as an Article 5 attack, like electronic warfare, because you can trigger the waves from abroad against the target. It's an offensive weapon, and we have to treat it like this. So, in my last comment, and I'm waiting your question. So this war in Ukraine is not a regional war, and will determine a new geopolitical order. Will be a new Cold War between Russia and the Western countries, and will have a great impact on Black Sea. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you very much, General Dinu. Really very significant points. It's not a war only about Black Sea regions or only to Ukraine, but it's a rather part of a rather larger strategy of Russia. That's why we have to, as you say, give a strong message, a unified message. And it's also interesting that Article 5 is valid if there is a cyber attack against one or many of the NATO members. That's a quite significant question, I think, that should be discussed. Thank you very much. So now our next panelist is Dr. Murat Aslan. He's a faculty member of the Sabahattin Zaim University, also a researcher at SETA. He served in various positions in Turkish Army before he voluntarily retired to become an academic. He also did his master and PhD degrees in the field of international relations. So now he's actually dominantly carrying out academic studies, especially on international relations and international security. Dr. Aslan, actually, I have a question about, the possible common attitudes that the countries can take against Russia, considering the yesterday's summit of NATO as well. I mean, is there a strong, unified attitude against Russia or not?
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Well, I have only 10 minutes, so I will be very fast, speak very fast. Sorry for this. Because we know that the situation is really complicated, complex, and the ambiguity is at the largest extent currently. And for this purpose, I want to touch 4 main issues just to answer this question. The first one is a clear visualization of Russia, and later then attitude of NATO. And interestingly, we have to discuss the impacts of this conflict to the other crisis areas like Syria and Libya, because it will be somehow, bear a type of potential to spread the conflict to other regions. And finally, I will conclude it with Turkish politics, adequately responding this crisis, meaning the pillars. Well, for the Russia, as Ambassador and Major General Dinu has just expressed, well, we don't have anything new for Russia. Okay, in 2008, it was Georgia. They had clear attempts to, check the regimes, control the regimes in Central Asia. They were persistent in Syria, and they rented, 2 bases for 49 years in Syria. Well, they are in Libya through a private military company, though I don't think that it's a private military company, but Spetsnaz, an offshoot of Spetsnaz. Another one is there in Africa, maybe challenging France. And in the meantime, it means another thing. They are just trying to employ a new strategy, encirclement or containment policy of the NATO alliance during the Cold War, directly challenging Soviet Union. And now they are in Africa, maybe making another encirclement, maybe, just prepared for future engagements. I don't know. And another one is the defense sales. It's not only Turkish S-400s, but, Russia is very keen to sell products to Egypt, for instance, to India, to China. Another thing, well, cooperation with China, that was very clear in yesterday's statement in NATO. Well, Balkans does have potential for any escalation, especially Russian support to Slavic nations over there, mainly the Serbs. And in the meantime, you can also watch the threats and narratives they had suffered for the last 2 decades. Well, then we have to, reshape the, discussion. What is the spirit of Russia? What's the ultimate goal? What is the main, concern? I have drafted a report, and it was published by New Strategy Center last September 2020. And I will repeat my argument over there. Russia is well aware of one thing. They are now in the phase of stagnation. That means Soviet Union has collapsed, and they believe that they are stagnating. So they have to be more offensive, at least to stop it and revert it back. Otherwise, they will retreat, be marginalized as a middle-class power, middle-class state. And if they can't prevent this retreat, that means they will collapse, because Russia is not pure Russian, and the territory coverage is really huge. And they are vulnerable because they extract gas, energy resources from the remote distances, and also from the Central Asian countries. They are well aware of it. And the decisive point is to not to, be away from the hot seas like a tourist, consideration, but to be stick to the sphere of influence of the Soviet Union and maybe be persistent in the Black Sea. And that means they don't want to lose the control of the resources and also an outreach to the globe, especially from the southern or southwestern flank of Russia. So this picture exactly pushed Russia to be more offensive if they feel that they have a capacity. But it requires a correct reading of what they have. And unfortunately, they didn't calculate exactly what they are doing because of the misassessment of their capacities and capabilities. So this is Russia. Now, let me go to NATO, please, because we have to compare it. We have to make a comparison of NATO and Russian atrocity. But let me clarify one thing. This war in Ukraine is a clear war of aggression. And in the literature, if you go through the rules, the basic principles of the just war, two main principles, jus ad bellum and jus in bello. That means how to start a war and how to sustain or conduct the war. Well, Russia violated these two principles. Well, then how we should respond it? Well, if it's about the law, there must be a mechanism that must be started through, the codes. Unfortunately, international law is lacking to start it because of the current, Russian presence in international politics, mainly in the UN Security Council. So it's another thing. But the mechanism within the circles of the law, well, they must start doing something. Well, let's go to NATO. What's the mission of NATO? What's the vision of NATO? Directly having Ukraine to the epicenter of their concerns. Well, if you just go through the statements of Stoltenberg, well, they say first they will take a defensive measure to at least prevent further escalations directly inside the NATO territories. On the other hand, another vision embedded with this is to avoid the Third World War. On the other hand, NATO vision requires a low-profile support to Ukraine, at least to have this conflict reach to a culmination point. And in my opinion, it has already reached, and facilitate Ukrainian offense to recapture their land. On the other hand, the final vision of NATO is adopting to the new normals. What is the new normals? Well, we had conventional during the Cold War, embedded to the unconventional. And right after the collapse of the Soviet Union, we discussed new terms like hybrid, like proxies, asymmetry, etc. Now, think that in the coming conflict environment, we will unite them all again. We will have conventional, unconventional, and all sorts of emerging new conflicts, including cyber, including space, including etc. So in this sense, NATO must reinvent itself to counter any type of modern and postmodern threats. And it needs a clear, resourcing for NATO countries that they will have to spend more money for this. Okay, the third question in my agenda is the impact of this crisis to the other regions like Syria and Libya. Well, there is one thing very clear. Russia does not want to step back from Syria and Libya. What Europeans did wrong during the Libya, well, they cooperated with Russia, mainly in Libya. And they tried to keep a type of balance with Russia in Syria. Now, the attitude of the Western countries, Europe, the United States, well, it will clarify what Russia will do. In order to have this conflict diffuse to the other regions and have the attention of NATO be more and more not focused, but be focused, defocused, Russia will insist on proxies in these regions. On the other hand, the Western decision, for instance, in Syria is really important because there must be a balanced strategy identified by the United States, European countries, EU, and also NATO. Think that, let's take Syria, for instance. If the American troops are withdrawn back from Syria, it's a clear reality that there will be a gap. If they don't, the continuity of the current Turkish-American, relations in terms of escalation will keep continue. So there must be another way to address the problems in Syria. Well, let's go to Libya. If we want to have Russians to leave Libya, well, now diplomacy this is what I believe, inadequate to push Russians leave Libya. Because right period to Ukraine, they might be persuaded through economic incentives, but today, no, they can't. They can't. So there must be another strategy in Libya. So we have a probability that this conflict will somehow reflections on the other crisis areas. On the other hand, the strategy of the Western countries, NATO, EU, Europe, and also Turkey, will exactly identify how the escalation will somehow occur in these regions. Okay, and final question of me is Turkish politics. Well, Turkey perceives itself as a gate to diplomatic solution and attempted to mediate. But please, mediation means what? Two parties must accept it. And once any of them says no, mediation ends. I mean, you can't coerce as a mediator. So in this case, this is my perspective, not official, I'm not embedded to government. Turkey must continue to this strategy up until there happens a type of stalemate, because a gate is always something that you can easily knock the door. On the other hand, well, Turkey is committed to the integrity of Ukraine, provides support and provided support to Ukraine, and well aware of the consequences, mainly the social consequences of this conflict. As far as I know, we have now hosting like 30,000 Ukrainians. These are the registered. That means it will keep increasing in the coming days maybe. But this is somehow important for Turkey because Turkish perception is the open door policy for immigrants. Well, and finally, I want to depict a short military assessment to see if the military picture will challenge all these issues. That means NATO's stance, impact on the other crisis regions, and also Turkish politics. Well, in terms of military assessment, now we have witnessed the strategic defense of Ukrainians. Russia attacked, they tried to stop them. They couldn't achieve in some fronts like the north of Kiev and also northeast and northwest of Crimea, but they were successful in the east. But today, now we have a culmination point that Russians cannot no longer advance. So they need what? They need further augmentation to their own forces and a good logistical chain. Yesterday's event, the sinking Orsk is a clear indication that they will have difficulties to change this situation. I mean, again, advancing inside Ukraine. But what I see is that the Russian desire is at least to reach Dnieper River, to keep or to control infrastructure established across this river, and again, at least to have a status quo, maybe if both parties agree to a ceasefire, because their concerns are actually Russian demography and also having a great leverage in the Black Sea politics. Just imagine that now they will challenge the other countries in the Black Sea by claiming an exclusive economic zone that will directly touch maybe to Romania. So these issues are heavily interlinked with the military campaign on the ground. If Ukraine achieves a strategic balance and later then starts a strategic offense, the Russians will push back maybe to restore the balance in the Black Sea. Then NATO must continue to support with critical military capacities and capabilities to Ukraine, at least to have Ukraine, offend and push back Russia, mainly from the Black Sea, in the vicinity of the west of the Crimea. But we will see if they can or not. So that concludes my presentation. Sorry for taking a long time and waiting for questions maybe in the second session.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Aslan. Actually, you emphasized that Russia is trying to get rid of like a political stagnation after Soviet time, and could be quite aggressive depending on the forces available to itself. And as a facing force, NATO should, I think, as you say, improve itself and revise and strengthen its force against such possible threats to the region and global system. Thank you very much, Dr. Aslan. And now we go to our final panelist, actually, Martin Sokolov. He's a non-resident research fellow at the Center for National Security and Defense Research at the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences. He's a former analyst at the Bulgarian Ministry of Defense and former senior national representative for Bulgaria at NATO Intelligence Fusion Center. So my question is actually, Mr. Sokolov, could you define a desirable security system for the Black Sea region? And is it really possible in the future that Russia could be a part of, rather than an opponent country, but it could be a part of such a security system in the Black Sea region?
Thank you for the question, and also thank you for the invitation to take part in such a distinguished panel. One of the biggest challenges is, after you had so many distinguished speakers, how to keep up the level, but I assure you I will do my best, and I will do also my best to keep it as short and as sweet as possible. Pertaining to your question, that was very much the case up until 2014. Even after Russia's invasion into Georgia, we had regional formats in which Russia was part of, but it did unilaterally to an extent, such as the Black Sea 4, that Russia stopped taking part in the regional formats pertaining to Black Sea security. But I will move forward if this is possible in the near to mid future in a little while, because first I would like to emphasize that we have to keep in mind that it's becoming more and more apparent, particularly with the situation in Ukraine and Russia's invasion, that in a way, the Kremlin has been dealing with abstract intelligence assessment of the situation on the strategic and operational level. It's very difficult to, in a way, foresee what they're going to do, because when intelligence analysts approach a given question, they follow variables and they evaluate likely scenarios. However, back in April last year, I actually published a piece under the title "Second Russian Invasion of Ukraine: Unlikely but Possible," in which I detailed why such an invasion would be a very bad idea and would resolve nothing. But I left a special couple of paragraphs at the end, which I think are especially valid now, because the Russian intelligence services have become increasingly ridden with unprofessionalism, with nepotism and corruption. This means that the chain of command within Russian intelligence services was not dependent on people giving accurate information, was not depending on accurate assessments. It was dependent on feeding from bottom to top information that would give them a higher rank, a higher position, that would basically ensure that they have a career development. This has distorted to a great extent the information that within a centralized form of government, which is Russia, to have basically unrealistic and unlikely developments and assessments at the desk of President Vladimir Putin. And what we're seeing now, I think that, yes, what is happening in Ukraine is a crisis, but most of the scenarios that follow from the day of the invasion, the 24th of February, from that point forward, are especially bleak scenarios for the Russian Federation itself. I particularly liked what Dr. Murat Aslan said, that Russia, we like to think of it as more or less homogenic and as a monolith. That is not at all the case. And since President Vladimir Putin is coming to power, his first task, or at least one of his first tasks, was to ensure that the Russian Federation can survive as a country. Now, he did that the easiest possible way, which was understandable at the beginning. Centralized power within himself and within Moscow. The problem with such an approach in the long term is that when there's no decentralization of government, and when the people responsible in the different republics within the Russian Federation, when they're not chosen based on professionalism, merit, or even capacity, but based on nepotism and corruption, is that in the long term, you create an unstable state. And again, bearing in mind that this is objectively the biggest country in the world, this is a huge, huge problem. And please let me emphasize also this: we often tend to focus on what could be a spillover effect from the war in Ukraine, and we often, of course, we have to emphasize that there is objective threat to certain NATO members in the region and NATO in general, as well as Europe. But I would like to point out that within the last 2 years, we had very big protests both in Belarus and Kazakhstan. Protests that, first of all, were anti-corruption. Were not anti-Russian. People there are, in my experience, overtly pro-Russian. The protests were not pro-EU, they were not pro-NATO, they were not pro-West. Anti-corruption explicitly. However, with Russia's involvement in the country and the ambition to quash the protests and support local strongmen, what happened in the view of many people there was that basically Russian influence within Belarus and Kazakhstan was equated with corruption itself. Now, as the weather is getting warmer, we are objectively entering the seasons which are for protests. And given that much of Russia's attention is focused on securing some sort of advances in Ukraine, I do expect that it's highly likely within the short to near term to have, again, big protests in both of these countries, where, again, local strongmen, possibly with some form of Russian support, might actually make the mistake of trying to quash social tensions with police or military force. This makes Russia's influence and interest in its own neighborhood, own near abroad, along its borders, extremely, extremely fragile. Also, I'd like to point to Chechnya. Of course, we know there is information, and it was made public, that Russians have sent Chechen fighters to Ukraine to do some of the almost certainly dirty work that Russia does not want to align itself with officially. However, we also have a lot of Chechens which are coming from around the world, which were expelled following the end of the Chechen War and Ramzan Kadyrov's put into power as a local strongman, that are going back to fight against Russians. Now, even if tomorrow or next week there's a certain form of, this is a hypothetical ideal solutions that Putin and President Zelensky, shake hands and say that there's a peace treaty, which for some abstract reasons is of use to everybody. A lot of these fighters, they're not going to just back down and say, well, sorry, thanks for participating, we're going home. No, there's going to be a flashing point, in my opinion, in the next couple of years, particularly in Chechnya. We often think that, with Kadyrov's rule there and his hold on power, that has been stabilized. I would say per contra. There's a huge possibility if, again, the local strongman is removed, a lot of people will focus there. And we're looking at a possible reignition of war, actual fighting on Russian territory, and in a war that objectively ended only in 2009. That's not long ago. There's a lot of embers there that could be reignited. So going back, and is Russia possible to participate in regional formats? I say it depends how it plays out. The Chinese, of course, taking advantage of the situation. And let me emphasize, war in Ukraine is not good for them. That's a challenge to the Belt and Road Initiative. Also, now there's a huge pushback against Western governments against what cooperating or working or even tolerating totalitarian or totalitarian-leaning regimes means. That means there's going to be also a special eye on China. So this war is not good for them. The reason they're trying to play some sort of middle ground with Russia is so that they can get a strategic say in strategic Russian corporations. And in the long run, particularly taking into consideration that Russia is unlikely, in my opinion, in the next 15 to 20 years, I would have to say that that's not what I'm reading, to come out in its current territory. I would say that we're going to move, and it's an inevitable conclusion for them to again refocus efforts and communicating and participating. This is post-Putin, of course, and post his cronies, to engage with neighbors, partners in strategic regions and strategic interests for them. And the Black Sea is for that. Remember that this is basically their only warm sea port is in Crimea. Everything else in the north freezes. So for them to be an even regional power is of the utmost importance to maintain presence in the Black Sea so they can project power in the Middle East, Central Asia, and North Africa. So they're going to come to this conclusion, and in some form, I do see them returning in the next 15 to 20 years at the most and cooperating with us around the Black Sea, with NATO to preserve some sort of strategic cooperation, and even with the EU. So following the bleak case scenario we're at the moment, I do see some light at the end of the tunnel, but it's greatly dependent on how the domestic situation in Russia is going to play out. I will stop here, and please, I look forward to your questions, and we'll be almost certainly happy to play the devil's advocate to provoke debates and conversations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sokolov. Really quite interesting to listen something about the internal politics of Russia. Actually, my aim was to ask these questions is just about this. You know, is it only related to the Putin administration that we see such attitudes from Russia, or could it be different if any change in a possible change in the Russian administration? We will see. Thank you very much. Actually, there are many questions flying in our minds, I am sure, but unfortunately we have a very limited time. We are already over a bit time at the moment. That's why I think it's not okay to get some questions from the audiences. Rather than having some questions, I just would like to ask our panelists if you would like to add anything before we go to the final remarks by Ambassador Costa. Is there any more remarks that you would like to make in 5 minutes? Maybe I may ask first to our first panelist, Chechelashvili, probably Ambassador Chechelashvili. Would you like to add anything quite briefly that you missed?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mr. Professor. First of all, I would like to thank all panelists. It was very, very interesting, and I've got a lot of new angles, and there is a lot of things I have learned. Thank you for that. What I want to say is that, of course, I mean, we are in the new world now from 21st and the 24th of February, but still we are applying all categories like sanctions, held actions. So I think that at the moment, what is most important is that we have to limit the capacities of Russian Federation to conduct this aggressive policy, not only against Ukraine. It's just one step and one stage in Russia's policy. But in general, to put an end to this capacity of Russian Federation to conduct this type of activities, which endanger the global security system and European security and Black security system. And in this light, any slightest sign of disagreement in anti-Russian coalition gives more capacities for Russian Federation. So I think that the main point now is to complete this full-fledged isolation, trade, financial, economic, political, and diplomatic of Russian Federation, to force it back to come to established rules of game on international arena. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And actually, Mr. Sokolov would like to add a couple of things, I think. Please.
Yes, just a brief remark, because first of all, take into consideration and as an assumption that Russia's future is not the brightest of possible as much as they would like. Take into consideration that China is also not have the best prospects in terms of demographic issues and in terms of the possibility of growth stagnation. I would say that it's of the utmost importance to encourage cooperation one, particularly for our region, to have regional formats to keep attention and cooperate to within the international structures of both the EU and NATO, especially, because I would say that we're looking that in the next couple of decades, we will be returning to, again, a possible unipolar world as we were in the 90s. It's very possible, in my opinion, that the US will again become the global superpower and even more powerful in terms of relative aspects to its competitors than it was in the 90s. And it will be very important to have drawn particular lessons from the 90s and early 2000s in order to respect the formats and alliances and cooperate explicitly and avoid certain endeavors that were made and possibly can be also described as unilateral mistakes in the 90s and early 2000s. So it's very important to emphasize and cooperate within the structures in which we participate and emphasize alliances and cooperation.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Sokolov. Is there any other comments? Okay, Murat, Aslan actually would like to add a couple of things.
Thank you, Professor. There was a type of statement which is really valuable for me. It's about revising Montreux Treaty. Well, there's one reality. The ones who signed Montreux, well, some of them are existent, some of them are partitioned. So there is a technical problem. This is the first issue. The second thing, it guarantees a safe passage from straits, and in the meantime, creates a type of regime that neither of the states will somehow challenge. Well, in the current status quo, Turkey closed the strait to the warships, and Article 19 of the agreement is very clear. On the other hand, the same treaty says, okay, the aerospace just across the straits, both Istanbul and Dardanelles, Çanakkale, well, Turkey must keep it open. This is another thing, to be discussed. But Montreux is also a type of concern for the Eastern European countries because it's heavily linked with the river regimes over there. That's clear. But I believe that Turkey is conservative in terms of keeping this treaty alive. On the other hand, there must be a consensus of the participant countries and also Turkey, maybe to revise it. But I don't think that Turkish government will somehow, tolerate it because Turkey sees it as a type of sovereign right up in the straits because there is a historical, how do you say, not discourse, but a process that built it. So I think it's an issue not to be discussed right now because the Ukraine and Russia crisis is somehow in the agenda. Maybe right after that, but today I don't see it as a probable course to discuss it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So Montreux regime is quite significant in terms of Black Sea security, and we will see what will happen. Is there really any possible request from the Russian side to revise it? We just not hope this, but it could be, a possibility. So. Actually, General Dinu, would you like to add a couple of last points or?
Yes, Professor. Thank you very much. I will start what I started in my address. So what we need in the region, we need a mutual understanding, a common view on the threat and Russian aggressive actions. We have to act smartly with a unified vision and with a great cohesion. We have great interest all the country in the Black Sea region. I didn't mention the gas resources. Russia, from an international point of view, can address any issue from international or from a legal point of view, including to revise the economic exclusive zones. So, because now it has Crimea, de facto inherited what Ukraine had as an economic zone. So we have to foresee and to discuss and to put in place those measures in order to protect our common interest in the Black Sea region. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, there are questions, unfortunately, we cannot take because, you know, we are coming to the very end of the panel. That's why I have to turn to Ambassador Dora Costa. And first of all, I would like to thank you for waiting such a long time. Actually, let me introduce you first of all. He's an ambassador and at the moment a senior associate expert in the New Strategy Center in Romania. He served as a Romanian Minister of Foreign Affairs. He also served as a president of the United Nations Human Rights Council. So I am sure he has a lot of things to say about the existing war in Ukraine. But unfortunately, we have a very limited time. We just would like from Costa to summarize the concluding remarks as much as possible. Thank you very much, please.
Thank you indeed. You know, I wish I were given an easier job than summing up one of the most valuable and so inspiring remarks that I have been listening to for the last almost 1 hour and a half. I'll try. What I'm trying to do now is to sort of, you know, not be that arrogant and introduce to you a synthesis of the debate, but rather a very timid sketch of some of the main ideas that maybe could be used later on for further discussion and in-depth debates. I will pick from the last remarks of Professor Acer. It's no surprise that there are more questions than answers, because when looking at how the Black Sea security may be looking like, and what is to be done in order to secure this security, to implement this security. Because it is what we see and what has transpired from the various interventions. We are witnessing a new division of Europe, actually. It is a sort of a Cold War 2.0 taking shape somewhere, looming just around the corner, because no matter how the war stops or when it stops, as one of our distinguished panelists said, it is hardly difficult to conceive that Russia, for instance, will cease pursuing new generation warfare, or it will just give up its interest of completely or as much as possible control the Black Sea. Having said that, it is, I think, one of the most valuable ideas that we've heard is the fact that Putin's plans are largely based on the past. He drew inspiration from Potsdam, from Yalta, God knows from where, but selectively, as one of another very inspired remarks mentioned. So this means a sort of walking with your backward in front. So it doesn't mean anything for the future development of the area. It's another challenge. To be less abstract, I would highlight the repeated remarks by actually all our panelists that to face and to successfully confront this attempt to actually destroy the world order as we have known it, there is a basic need to unity in both EU and NATO to endure. In itself, this proves to be a challenge. I do not need to enter into details, and you have mentioned some of them, which doesn't mean that the job is easier. I would, on a very personal note, I would add, however, that yesterday's decisions at the extraordinary summit of NATO are somehow encouraging. And we need to keep an eye on what is going on with the Council today. To go further, there is a clear-cut acknowledgement and realization that what comes will be totally different. We are in a new world. And one of our distinguished panelists put it in a very inspiring way. We woke up on the 24th of February in a new world. Indeed, we did. Well, now, how do we cope with that? And I come back to the unified reaction, and most importantly, to my mind, to what several speakers have emphasized on the regional cohesion and coherence, more cooperation on the regional level among the other states. What about Russia? Russia now is isolated. UN General Assembly, 2 resolutions actually highlighted this political isolation. But of course, we all realize that we cannot simply discard Russia from the map. We just can't pretend it doesn't exist. It does exist. And for many of our friends and allies, and I mean it in NATO parlance, it is a very important member of the international community. Well, this important member of the international community needs to learn how to behave in this international community. How can you do that? And an idea was mentioned, which is worth discussing and seriously analyzing. We do that by engaging it. Okay, we have engaged Russia, and there were references to regional formats that Russia just choose to leave and forget about. So why do it again? Well, this is a question I do not have the answer, nor has the answer been very clear in our debate, because actually it is a beginning of a debate. The value is to raise such questions, which is, to my mind, one of the greatest contributions that this meeting of ours has brought about. Last 2 points. There was a question, and I think we can come back to it because it links to what I've just said, whether Russia, I was talking about engaging Russia, which was mentioned before by several speakers. The question is, but does it mean that Russia is to be part of a future Black Sea regional security system? Again, this question is one of the most exciting ones. Not least, and this would be rather the end of my remarks, because I think that several speakers have highlighted the fact that what happens in the Black Sea, unfortunately, or fortunately, God knows, does not stay in the Black Sea. Fortunately, perhaps, because it means that the effects, the consequences of Russia's aggression against Ukraine put the Black Sea on the map so strongly, so expensively. I apologize for this remark, but this is the truth. Now everybody knows where the Black Sea is. Now everybody knows it bears, whatever happens in the Black Sea, bears on Syria, on Libya, on Middle Eastern situation, on the Caucasus. So what we usually call the wider Black Sea area in our previous discussions. And this was highlighted during the talks. I think that the very participation to this debate is mirroring this reality, that is to say, the Black Sea area needs to be approached coherently with all participants involved. And that's another great achievement of this conference. At the same time, under these circumstances, I would humbly plead for further in-depth dialogues among us, as well as among other entities similar to ours. The tsunami of information we are subject to is truly confounding, actually. And we need to clarify our image, and we can do that only by sharing and debating among ourselves. Thank you very much for your patience. And I assure you that any valuable ideas that were not mentioned in my comments are the responsibility of myself, and I do apologize for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Costa. Thank you for all these quite significant remarks. And I also share personally that, you know, only such occasions we are able to listen to the experts from the regional countries like Georgia, Bulgaria, and Romania. I think we should, as you say, increase such occasions to share the ideas about the security of the Black Sea region. And again, as a last point, I would like to very, from my heart to thank our panelists for participating in such a significant roundtable. And I also would like to thank our audiences for listening. And the last thank should go to SETA for organizing such a timely roundtable meeting on war in Ukraine. Thank you very much, and hope to see you again. Thank you.